Opioid dependence slowly creeps in on you. And for me, it was at that point when I noticed that I needed more and more of the same amount of the medication I was taking. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a continuation of this series on the opioid crisis, where we're looking at healing from opioid use. And I'm your host, Trish Barasa, for this podcast, Beyond Condition. When it comes to chronic pain management, and I've explained it before, there's not many options in terms of what is the effective way of managing the pain. And so that's how opioids come into play, because they are very effective both in acute and chronic pain management. The only problem is that when used with chronic pain management, the prolonged use could easily result in opioid use disorder. And that's how prescriptions, which are initially a very innocent intervention, become a problem. For me, the prescription pitfalls began with initially having access to the medication itself as an analgesic for chronic pain management. And this was because of co-occurring conditions, including conditions like gastritis, which made it difficult for me to use drugs that I had used, like NSAID, for a long period of time. And so with time, opioids became the choice treatment for me when it came to pain management. And this being a chronic problem, prolonged use of opioids end up now putting me at risk for opioid use disorder. So what happened is, at one point, I could access the opioids, and eventually I reasoned with myself and got to a point where I was actually rationalizing that going to hospital was a very long process and costly at that. And I could easily just administer these drugs myself safely through an intramuscular injection. And remember, I had done this before, having had a sister, nursed a sister, who was at her end stage of life. I was quite excited to hear that the government is taking a strong position on substance abuse, alcohol, and related drug abuse. And it's good to know that there are going to be reforms towards supporting not just individuals, because there are interactions. It's an entire ecosystem, from the supply side to the patient-doctor relationship, to the medical representatives who market these medications. That's all the way to the illegal supply, enforcement, surveillance, and even compliance. And I'm glad to hear that there are actually steps that are in place to repeal or reform the Pharmacy and Poisons Act that we are currently using, so that we can sufficiently address the entire ecosystem of opioid use as a substance in society. Opioid dependence slowly creeps in on you. And for me, it was at that point when I noticed that I needed more and more of the same amount of the medication I was taking to give me relief from the pain the pain that I was going through. So at that point where I needed more of the medication for relief, and then when I didn't take the medication, I had other symptoms. I noticed that I now had a problem, and I also got to inform myself on opioid use disorder, and I did get educated into the knowledge that I was an opioid addict, and that I had developed tolerance for the medication. And also, at one point, we've seen the zombies of Philadelphia. At one point, I would inject myself more of the drug than I needed. And remember, I was now accessing it myself. And I would actually literally just find myself standing still in the bathroom and holding on to the sink. And at one point, I fell and hurt myself really, really badly. It could have been more fatal. So those are some of the things that made me realize that this was no longer normal and that the drug was doing harm to me. You get to the breaking point when you no longer are actually using the medication for what its intended purpose is. You're actually just injecting yourself for the euphoria because it comes with a bonus. Opioids they really interfere with the body's natural way of pain relief, and they don't just relieve you of pain, they also interfere with the modulation of neurotransmitters. So you get dopamine, you get serotonin, you get altered moods, you become easily irritable. So you get to that point where you're no longer just taking the drug for pain relief. You're taking the drug for any other reason, and the pain is not even going away. You have become tolerant to the amount that you initially had to take for pain relief, and you're taking more than is enough. And I previously mentioned taking 10 vials in a night. That is a disaster because that night could easily be a fatal night for me. I don't know how many of you have watched the Zombies of Philadelphia or any fentanyl-related videos and movies out here and clips and stuff. But you literally can stay still in a couple of minutes. I don't know how long it is, but I have found myself in the same position for so long, not moving because I had injected myself an opioid that was highly potent. And what you see on TV is not made up, it is real. You literally can be still for such a long time. Opioids impair your cognitive function. So things like decision making are affected in a negative manner. Memory is affected. You actually may not be able to remember something you did and that you are informed about by either a close friend or family or even a colleague if you're working. Opioids will alter your moods. You will be irritable. Opioids will affect how you relate with people and they will strain your relations. Opioids will affect decisions you make on finances. You get this compulsive disorder to get the drug more than even to buy food, and that could affect relations and family relations and any other social relations. Opioids can affect your finances. I know that rationally, it may seem more expensive sometimes to go to a doctor, pay consultation 5,000 shillings, especially with our private hospitals, and that time spent waiting on the queues. But in the end, opioids, which at one point may not be as expensive, will cost your life and they will cost your relationships. They will strain your relationships. For me, they strained my marriage. They strained my relationships with my kids as well. So they will strain your relationships. So they will really affect the way you think. You will be impaired in so many ways, and your decisions will be affected negatively. Your memory and many other things, including that urge to get the drug more than think about anything else, irritability, anger bursts, and you lack inhibition for anything. You really just are foolishly courageous. One step towards helping yourself once you realize that you have an opioid disorder, and this is something that you self-diagnose, is seeking help. And there are different rehabilitation centers out here which are focused on substance abuse, which include drugs like opioids and their abuse. So one step is to seek help. And I would like to encourage you that you're not alone. And all of us out here who are probably not affected, our families and friends. For me, I was fortunate to have what I call my tribe, a community around me. And that's why I want to encourage a community around those of us who are struggling with opioid use disorder. So seek help. There are rehabilitation centers out here. There are helplines if and when you need help. I know the Kenyan government is doing a lot. The private sector is doing a lot more. And I actually applaud the government for what it's doing. So there are rehabilitation centers where you can go to and be assisted for having an opioid use disorder. And there are also clinicians and healthcare workers, doctors, medical practitioners out there who are solely focused on supporting those who have fallen into the pitfalls of opioid use disorder. And they will support you. A starting point of seeking help is walking into any of the level 4, level 5 health facilities. Once you turn in there and you seek any of their rehabilitation centers, and most of the counties have set up a rehabilitation center, especially through their county referral hospitals, you will be able to get help. Privately also, you can get help through different facilities around the country. I don't want to mention any particular one, but for public hospitals, most level 4, level 5 hospitals do have a rehabilitation center. We also have private hospitals and private medical practitioners who are very sympathetic towards those of us who are suffering or who are journeying with chronic pain or the disorder of opioid use. And you can reach out to us as well. You can reach out to us and let us know that you do need help. We're here for you. For me, I was fortunate enough, and I am fortunate enough to be surrounded by a community of friends, and that's the least I can do to any of you out there, offer a community to you through this platform. I will provide a description on the NACADA helpline, and I know that NACADA is also doing a lot to support people. They already have some work especially in the coast area, and the description should provide a helpline for those of us who need support for opioid use disorder. So this is an ecosystem, and one component of this ecosystem is the healthcare providers. Showing compassion to those who need your support and your help as healthcare providers is a big step towards addressing this, because I know most of us would not even want to take that step to come look for help because we're afraid that it's embarrassing. We're afraid of the stigma that we will face when we come out and say that we are suffering from opioid use disorder. So show compassion and be available to provide support. And don't stigmatize those who are suffering or journeying with this, because like I said before, just an accident or an operation, surgery, and you are actually a possible victim of opioid use disorder. In the end, I really do envision a future where we are able to look at opioids for what they are, for their benefits and for their risks. And if and when given a chance to shape this future, I would say that we look at it holistically from an ecosystem point of view. These are drugs that bear very heavy risks. These are drugs whose impact has not been exhaustively looked into. We're still looking at studies around them. And yes, they do provide a lot of relief. But what are the options? People with pain need to be supported, because living with pain is not an alternative. What are the options? Are people educated? Is the society educated? Those are the things we really need to look at, and look at this thing holistically, because it does not affect an individual. This is not a disease, because a disease is for my body. This is an illness. It has a social factor. It affects employers. It affects family. It affects friends. It affects the entire society, and it strains the public health. My road to recovery is not a done deal. There's always a risk for a relapse, and that risk is very much alive. And I know that even as I stand here proudly claiming to be on the road to recovery, I am not completely out of the woods yet. And so I keep going each day at a time, knowing that it's a struggle. It's not an easy journey. It will not be easy for you, and I can assure that. But surrounded by community and supported by friends, and with this platform there for you, educating yourself, inspiring hope and letting you know that even I am struggling each day at a time. We can do this. We really can do this. We can actually recover from opioid use disorder. I am on the road to recovery. You can be on the road to recovery. I just want to inspire hope to you, and I want you to remain educated as caregivers, to know what signs to look for, to know that the journey out of opioid use is not easy. Once you stop using opioids, you're struggling. You have gastric distress. You're having diarrhea simply because you've stopped. Your muscles are aching simply because you've stopped. So support people who are journeying with this, people who are on their road to recovery, and let's remain there for each other. Let's provide this community. Let's remember that opioids take over our body's natural ways of, of taking care of pain, and they even accentuate pain. And so whatever way someone is behaving as an opioid user is not normal, but it is nothing out of the ordinary, and any one of us can be affected. So show the support and offer community to those who are suffering with opioid use. Thank you so much for continuing to engage with us even as we look into this particular component of chronic illness. We continue and will continue engaging with you. Remember that I am not just a chronic illness champion, I'm also an opioid survivor, and I look at different components. And right now we're looking at the opioid crisis, different components of chronic illness. And I continue being your champion. And remember to support each other and to be there for one another, and to continue empowering each other and use this platform for your journey. I'm your host, Trish Barasa.